So what if the reason you spent 4 hours just staring at your phone on the couch yesterday isn't because you're fundamentally flawed?
Right. Which is what we always tell ourselves.
Exactly. What if it's actually because your brain is functioning flawlessly? Welcome to this custom deep dive where we're basically dismantling everything you think you know about your own behavior.
It is a pretty wild ride today.
It really is. Our mission today is to look at three seemingly different concepts you provided: the mechanisms of human inertia, the shadow of excessive kindness, and the architecture of personal respect. And we're going to uncover how they form this invisible, interconnected operating system.
Yeah, an operating system that completely dictates how others perceive you and, how you navigate the world.
Because we're looking at the hidden forces behind why you do what you do. So, setting the stage here, these sources might seem like they're tackling totally different things, right? Like laziness, being nice, and getting respect.
They do seem separate.
Hmm.
But when you look closely, they actually form a single, really fascinating blueprint of human psychology. We operate under this illusion that we're making conscious, rational choices all day.
Right, like we're always in the driver's seat.
Exactly. But these frameworks show that so much of our life is actually governed by this biological mandate to just conserve energy.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Ugh.
Because that first source, the mechanisms of human inertia, it completely flips the script on laziness.
It really does. It takes all the guilt out of it.
Totally. The traditional narrative around laziness is just so heavy, It's highly moralized. Like if you waste a Sunday doing absolutely nothing, society labels it a character defect.
A lack of willpower, yeah.
But looking at the phrase human inertia, I started picturing motivation as this massive, heavy boulder resting in the middle of a field.
Oh, I like that visual.
Right. Because physics tells us a body at rest stays at rest. So is laziness just, a highly judgmental word for a completely natural physical and psychological state?
What's fascinating here is the source's specific use of the word mechanisms. By defining laziness as a mechanism rather than, like, a moral failing, it forces us to question all those assumptions.
Because mechanisms aren't inherently bad or good, they just run.
Exactly. Mechanisms have gears, they have levers, triggers. Laziness isn't a lack of character, it's a systemic response.
Yeah.
But your boulder analogy,
Yeah. Does it hold up?
well, it works for basic physics, but human inertia is actually trickier because it's proactive. A boulder just sits there passively.
Right.
But your brain actively calculates the metabolic cost of starting a task. It floods your system with avoidance chemicals. It isn't just resting, it is actively fighting movement.
Actively fighting it. Wait, so when I'm procrastinating, my brain is doing work to keep me from doing work.
Precisely. And it all comes down to evolutionary mismatch. Think about the ancestral environment your brain evolved in, right? Calories were incredibly scarce.
Like you couldn't just open a fridge.
Exactly. Expending energy without a guaranteed return was dangerous. So the brain developed this highly sophisticated cost-benefit analyzer.
Okay, so when I think about starting a massive spreadsheet for work,
Your brain evaluates the caloric expenditure required for that deep cognitive focus. It looks at the spreadsheet, realizes it cannot eat the spreadsheet, and determines the energy cost is just way too high.
that is wow. So it just throws up a blockade.
It restricts dopamine. And dopamine isn't just a reward chemical, it's a motivation molecule. Without that initial spike, the friction of starting feels physically painful.
So you weren't lacking moral fiber at all.
No, your internal mechanisms are just executing a survival command. Because the perceived effort of moving your metaphorical boulder is too high.
That significantly changes how you, look at a sluggish afternoon. It's a mechanical state. To get that moss-covered boulder rolling requires an immense spike of initial energy.
Which your biology is just screaming at you to avoid.
Yeah.
But here's the thing for you, the listener, to think about. Are you unfairly judging yourself for a character flaw when you're just experiencing human inertia?
Because once the boulder is rolling, the inertia shifts, right? A body in motion stays in motion.
Exactly. But overcoming that initial psychological gravity is the hardest part. When you stop moralizing it, you can actually design ways to hack the system. Like breaking tasks down so small your brain doesn't see them as a caloric threat.
That makes total sense. And it got me thinking, if our physical and cognitive default is just sitting on the couch to avoid burning calories, do we do the exact same thing socially?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there a social equivalent to staying in bed? Because that naturally brings us to our second source, the shadow of excessive kindness.
Yes, the path of least resistance in our social interactions.
But I have to push back here a little bit. When I first read about the dark side of being too nice, it felt wrong. I mean, from preschool, we're taught to share, be polite, be accommodating.
Society rewards it constantly.
Right. Being nice is universally considered a virtue, so how can kindness possibly have a dark side?
It seems contradictory until you look at the source's exact phrasing, shadow and too nice. You have to separate genuine altruism from conflict avoidance. We have a really bad habit of conflating the two.
Okay, so what's the difference mechanically speaking?
Genuine kindness is an act of surplus. You have the energy, the time, the emotional capacity, and you offer it freely. But excessive kindness, it usually stems from a completely different mechanism.
A mechanism of deficit, like we talked about with inertia.
Exactly. It takes energy to set boundaries or engage in healthy conflict. Often, being too nice is just social inertia. It's a defensive mechanism to avoid friction.
Here's where it gets really interesting. These sources are totally mirroring each other. The physical mechanism of conserving energy is laziness, and the social mechanism is excessive kindness.
This raises an important question, though. At what exact point does kindness stop being a gift to others and start becoming a shield for ourselves?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Think about being in a 2-hour meeting on a Friday afternoon.
The worst.
Right. The meeting is wrapping up and your boss asks for a volunteer for a weekend project. The room goes dead silent. It gets incredibly uncomfortable. Finally, you raise your hand and say, I can do it.
Not because I genuinely want to sacrifice my Saturday, but because the tension in the room is just unbearable.
And how does your brain process that tension? Social conflict, or even just the potential for disapproval, activates the amygdala. Your brain registers social tension as a literal physical threat.
So setting a boundary or saying no requires a massive expenditure of emotional calories.
It requires you to stand firm in the face of perceived danger. So saying yes becomes the path of least resistance. When you volunteer, you get an immediate wave of relief.
The tension breaks, the boss smiles, we all go home.
Your brain rewards you for neutralizing the threat. But you aren't being a saint. You're engaging in a defensive behavior to avoid the cost of friction.
Wow, you think you're being this wonderful team player, but really, you're letting social gravity pull you into total compliance.
And that is the shadow. The visible action is the smile, the nod. But the shadow trailing behind it is exhaustion, resentment, and fear.
You're managing everyone else's reactions just so you can stay in an emotionally comfortable state of rest. But there's a huge long-term cost to
A
that.
severe cost, because if you yield to both physical and social inertia, you lose your shape.
Which perfectly triggers the premise of our final source, the architecture of personal respect. So what does this all mean? I kept picturing this in terms of building a house.
Okay, let's hear the house analogy.
If your foundation is made out of human inertia, just this lazy, shifting soil taking the path of least resistance, and your load-bearing walls are made of excessive kindness.
Where you just bend to every single breeze.
Exactly. If you bend to every pressure, the entire structure collapses. You have no foundational strength.
A structure with no resistance cannot hold weight. The source zeroes in on that word, architecture. Architecture implies active construction. It requires blueprints and structural integrity.
It's not something that just magically happens.
No, respect is not innate. And it's not freely given just because you're accommodating. It has to be built and maintained.
But I feel like most people assume respect is the default reward for just being a good, nice person.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the hidden reason people don't respect you. Humans are highly social primates. We are constantly, subconsciously probing the boundaries of the people around us.
Probing how? Like, are we actively trying to manipulate each other?
Usually it's totally subconscious.
Yeah.
A colleague asks you to cover a shift. A friend makes a slightly belittling joke. They're leaning against your walls to see what they're made of.
To see if the house holds up?
Right. And if you instantly fold because of that social inertia, because you want to avoid the friction of saying, actually, I don't appreciate that joke, you signal that you have no structural integrity.
You essentially tell them, I am not solid. Don't rely on me to hold my shape. You become like a flat platform.
And what do people do with a flat platform?
They walk all over it.
Exactly. Not out of malice, necessarily, but because a space with no resistance practically invites you to walk on it. People cannot respect a structure that doesn't stand firm on its own.
That hits hard. We respect mountains because they don't move when we push them.
Yes, we respect boundaries when we feel the firm edge of them. If you constantly yield, You deny the other person the friction necessary for them to even perceive you as a solid object.
You become a ghost, just an extension of their architecture.
Exactly. Being respected requires you to take up space, and taking up space inherently creates friction.
So to build this architecture, you literally have to fight your own biology. Your brain says conserve energy, say yes, but to earn respect, you have to spend the energy.
You have to act in direct defiance of your own inertia. Building respect is an active, caloric pursuit.
So recapping this whole journey for the listener, we started by understanding laziness not as a moral failing, but as a simple mechanism of physical inertia.
Right, the brain conserving calories.
Then we saw how excessive kindness is just the social manifestation of that exact same inertia, avoiding the caloric cost of conflict.
The path of least resistance.
And finally, realizing that true personal respect requires the active architecture of pushing back against both of those forces. It completely recontextualizes every interaction.
It really does. Which means we have to ask the listener directly, what stands out to you in your own behavior?
Where are you letting inertia dictate your architecture?
Right, audit your own life. Are there relationships where you think you're being kind, but you're actually just avoiding the energetic cost of a difficult conversation?
Or goals you abandoned because you thought you were lazy, when your brain was just protecting you from the friction of starting.
Every time you give in to the path of least resistance, you're dismantling your own architecture. You have to lean into the friction.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought to mull over. If respect requires constant structural friction and setting hard boundaries.
And enduring social conflict.
Yeah. And if our natural default biological state is simply to conserve energy and yield, is true personal respect actually an unnatural state?
Oh, wow.
Is being deeply respected simply the rare social reward we get for intentionally defying our own psychological gravity? Something to think about.